Could one of the elite prospects in the 2022 NFL Draft have a Derwin James-like slide to the Chargers at 17? It's Mock Draft Monday, and today we're looking at dream scenarios for the Chargers in round one.
You are Locked On Chargers, your daily podcast on the Los Angeles Chargers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, and welcome into the Locked On Chargers podcast. I'm your host, Daniel Wade, joined as always by my co-host, David Droegemeier, and we've been covering the Chargers together for over 6 years now. We're heading into our 5th season as the host of the Locked On Chargers podcast, bringing you your team every day. Thank you guys for making us your first listen on this Mock Draft Monday to make sure you never miss the show. And we have some big guests potentially coming up for you guys this week, including the Athletics' Daniel Popper. Make sure you guys subscribe to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel and also follow the show for free on all platforms wherever you get your podcast from. But on today, it's all, steam ahead, David, full steam ahead towards the draft with free agency all but wrapped up at this point. And on today's show, we wanted to do something fun and get into our dream scenarios for the Chargers at 17, talk about some guys that could potentially be a long shot, but you'd be happy to see them have a Rashawn Slater, Derwin James-esque fall to the Chargers at 17. And then in segment 2, we'll be talking about our favorite realistic draft target for the Chargers in round one. I think there's a couple guys there that make a lot of sense. And then to wrap the show up, things will get interesting as we give our dark horse candidates as we see it now, a little less than a month left before the draft. Some guys maybe we haven't talked about as much that the Chargers could surprise everyone with if they take them with the 17th pick. But David, it starts with the big one, the dream scenarios. And I think this is in part bred by the Chargers getting some guys that we never thought they'd have a chance at, right? Like I said, with Rashawn Slater last year at 13, Derwin James at 17 when he was drafted in 2018. And the Chargers have gotten really lucky. Justin Herbert could probably throw his name in there as well. And so there's always going to be guys where we're like, there's no way they fall to the Chargers, right?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we end up not talking about them as much because of those reasons, right? Because we're just like, hey, that guy's never going to make it. With Derwin James, it's like, yeah, obviously if he's there, you take him. Yeah. But he's not going to be there. So that, I think, brings up this segment of getting into this dream draft day scenario for the Chargers in round one. And I know there's one guy that you definitely have your eye on. So, David, if a dream scenario played out, one top prospect found a way to slide to the Chargers at 17, who would be your dream pick?
The biggest gamble in all of professional sports is the NFL draft because you just never know what's going to happen. You never know who's going to be there. And that's why, for me, my dream scenario is to have a Rashawn Slater type player on the right side of the offensive line. And for me, I know this is a left tackle right now, but that is Charles Cross. And my goodness, man, when I put on the tape to watch this guy, the first thing that pops into my head is this right here is an NFL-ready tackle. No question about it. He has a high IQ. He is quick enough to get to the combo blocks. He does a great job of staying square to his defenders. He does a good job of getting out to his engaging in his kick slide, getting out to those speed rushers. Man, he has strong hands. When he locks onto you, you're done. You're not going anywhere. He has you locked up. He can handle the speed rush. There's just so many good things to like about Charles Cross, and man, it would be just absolutely amazing to have two equal level or two close to equal level players on each side of your offensive line to protect Justin Herbert for hopefully the next decade.
And the thing is like Tom Telesco went into the last draft not having a left tackle, right? Brandon Staley openly admitting the Chargers didn't really have a left tackle and they had a hole at that position with only Trey Pipkins and Storm Norton on the roster. And the Chargers rolled the dice and gambled on, the 13th overall pick, and they landed Rashawn Slater. And Charles Cross is not Rashawn Slater, so let's get that out of the way right now. But I think what he provides more than someone like Trevor Penning is this dude's ready to go from a pass protection standpoint far as the dude just super solid there. I mean, he's definitely had a couple rough moments. I mean, Mississippi State game from the Mississippi State game. When they played Texas A&M, he had a couple of rough moments, but then he played Alabama and just absolutely, was stonewalling everybody. And I think that's what I like. And kind of like Rashawn Slater last year, in the running game, his positioning is great. He gets in the way of guys. He's not the, road paver guy that you need to eat glass and like Trevor Penning necessarily. But when you look at the difference, I'd rather have a guy who's more ready in pass protection now and does enough in the running game than a guy who might struggle early on in pass protection while being, a nasty guy in the running game. So I think that's where this would kind of come into play as far as, okay, you don't want to have to take or right tackle with the 17th overall pick just out of necessity, because it's going to be a hard situation to find. You're probably not going to be getting the best player available, at least in my opinion. If it's someone like Trevor Penning there, it's probably going to be guys that I want more there. Charles Cross is there. That's a dream scenario for the Chargers. That's how you lock up bookend tackles like that. I mean, I think if you're looking at, some of the shortcomings from a guy like Charles Cross, because he's not a perfect prospect. He's not as technically refined, but he's also a guy that's, thought of as a top 10 pick for a reason. I know one thing that scares me a little bit is the anchor, just because he always stops, right? It always ends up holding up, but he gets close, right? And I think that is good space management. He knows, not to let him get too close, but he does get backed up. I would like to see him maybe gain a little bit of weight, because he's definitely on the thinner side, but a pretty athletic guy. And I think the other thing is just inside moves in the running game. Mostly he got beat a couple times for tackles for loss and things like that. But every prospect's going to get dinged in some areas for sure.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think it's something similar to that, as far as the running game is concerned. And what I saw is when he was trying to climb to the second level, he wasn't always the most accurate getting to those spots. And, he wasn't really nasty or anything, but he did his job. Like he did enough to get in the way or keep his defender from making a play most of the time. But that's one of the things I'd like to see him improve his game at the next level, is just when he is asked to move and pull, to get out there and really lock onto your target and remove him from the play. I mean, that's something I think that can be coached, that can be added to his game. But he is absolutely a NFL ready pass protector right now. He's phenomenal in that aspect, and there's not many other pass protectors in this class that are as ready as he is.
Yeah, and he fits well in your scheme too, the zone running scheme, where you're not going to have him just trying to blow guys up off the line of scrimmage in the running game for the most part.
Yeah.
But David, I mean, if we're talking about dreaming, maybe it's like a gas mask dream and a gas mask situation where a guy like Sauce Gardner falls to the Chargers at 17 at a position where it may not seem like you have as big of a need, with Michael Davis and Asante Samuel Jr. being your CB2 and CB3, but one of those guys where it's like if he's on the board, you just have to take him, because the dude with JC Jackson would just create such a dynamic duo as far as cornerbacks. I mean, ball skills, and Daniel Jeremiah comped this guy to Antonio Cromartie. Like, if that dude could somehow find, if I'm dreaming big, I'm going with Sauce Gardner for sure.
I mean, how could you not? I mean, Jesus Christ, this guy has not ever given up a touchdown the entirety of his college career. Yeah. There is no other measure of dominance that can really even be equated to that as a corner. Like, that's what you want. That is unbelievable production at the college level. And you just love this guy's attitude and his swagger and his confidence. He wants to go up against your number one wide receivers. He wants to shut them down. He wants to embarrass them. He wants to lock them up and completely throw away the key. That is what Sauce Gardner does. And I cannot wait to see him play at the next level. I just hope it's not anywhere close to the AFC West. And honestly, nowhere in the AFC period would be ideal.
Yeah, I mean, he said he wants to go be the best corner in the league as a rookie, right? I mean, you have to have some confidence, and you need confidence to play that position and to have the nickname Juice, right? But the dude just stays so connected, like he's just right on you your entire route. I mean, and you got to see him go up against Alabama.
He's got that size you love too.
Yeah, I mean, that's where it gets the Cromartie, comps, just the ball skills, the size there. And like the short area quickness, I think for a dude that size, that just is super rare. He does get a little handsy. He's going to have to clean some of that stuff up. And the tackling is definitely hit or miss there. But if you're talking about a pure shutdown coverage player, I mean, there's nobody you would look at besides that. And it's just not going to happen. But I'm dreaming, okay? So let him dream. Like, when I'm not dreaming of Built Bars, I'm dreaming of Sauce Gardner. But coming up next, we do have some very realistic options for the Chargers. Our favorite of the realistic options, I think, for the Chargers. So we'll get into those guys after this. But my favorite. All right, David, well, we talked about our dream scenarios for the Chargers at 17, and it's nice to dream. Let us dream, right? But we do have to get into some more realistic options for the Chargers. And we were thinking about doing, our top 5 as far as guys that we'd want in the first round if we had our preference. But we decided to go with this format and talk about just our favorite pick at 17 for the Chargers of a guy that we think is going to be there. Obviously, you never know, like we talked about. But Make sure you guys also, if you need to keep an NFL show around to keep up with everything going on around the league and what other teams could be looking at to potentially snatch somebody away from the Chargers at 17, make sure to follow the Locked On NFL Draft, Locked On NFL show with the best experts around the Locked On Podcast Network. But this is a tough one, David, because we haven't done our favor yet. We've gone through a lot of different options, and I've had fun with just getting into mocks where we can change our pick in the first round. Get to talk about different guys and how that would impact it. But today we're giving our favorite as we're sitting here, and it can obviously change in the next month. But if you're talking about your favorite realistic option for the Chargers at 17, who are you going with?
Yeah, I mean, I've bounced around to a couple of different guys, but I'm going back to one of my favorites and a guy who I've loved his tape. Even when I go back and watch it again, it just reinforces my feelings. And that is Andrew Booth Jr. out of
Okay.
Clemson. I can't get enough of watching him. He's a phenomenal player. 68 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 5 interceptions that last year in college at Clemson. He turns his head around, looks for the football. His ability to go up and get the ball, especially up against Miami, he was fantastic there. He makes contested catches extremely difficult. Like he gets in your space, and he has the athleticism and the jumping ability to get in position to really make that difficult. He can flip his hips very, very well. He has that stop and start ability where he can put his foot in the ground and just take off and go, and you just love that. He blitzes like an animal. I mean, like a Tasmanian devil. He's
so
unbelievable.
Fun.
Like he is a weapon in that aspect. He's a corner that you definitely want to see him come off the edge because he does that at a very, very high level. He's like a heat-seeking missile to the ball carrier. Like his mission is search and destroy, and you love that. And he fights off blocks all the time. It's all over his tape. Andrew Booth Jr. is a guy I'm still very, very high on, still very excited about, and would absolutely love if the Chargers were to take him at 17.
Yeah, and I think, he was a guy that was very commonly mocked before the Chargers, right? But now he'd obviously just the one little red flag that you would have is just he just had surgery on a sports hernia. Is still expected to be back before training camp. So I don't know if it's something that, would push him down out of the first round or anything crazy like that.
Yeah.
But I do think it is a realistic, opportunity for the Chargers to potentially get in on him at 17. I think it's the same logic there, David, where it's not like they need a corner, but when you see a guy like that has that kind of ball skill specifically, I mean, that backhanded, one-handed interception, you just don't see that often. I think it's
ridiculous.
You're just trying to go best player available and get a guy on defense that is going to help you, no matter what it means for someone like a Michael Davis or Asante Samuel Jr.
Yeah. I mean, that's absolutely right. I mean, you're going to figure it out when you have a player of that caliber that you can add to your defense. I mean, hey, like they say, defense wins championships, and Brandon Staley
loves cornerbacks.
Loves corners. He said it on multiple different occasions. He's always going to be looking to add to that position. And why shouldn't you? Especially if you can get them in the draft, get a very high-quality player on a rookie cost-controlled contract for 4 or 5 years as a first-round pick, and you got him locked in. Because, I mean, hey, yeah, you got other guys on contracts, but those contracts are going to expire. So you always have to continue to replenish that position because receivers are too damn good in the NFL, especially the receivers that are in the AFC West.
Yeah, and I mean, you can just never have enough of it. And when these games turn into shootouts, like I've talked about before, like sometimes you just need somebody to get a pick. Like even if they're giving up some yards in that game, if they can just buy you that extra possession, if they can go close out a game for you by turning the ball over, right? Because that's what Brandon Staley has brought in during this off-season period. Closers.
Yes.
Khalil Mack, a guy who can get you a sack at the end of the game. A JC Jackson, a guy that can get you a pick maybe when you're trying to come back or when you're trying to end a game. Like those are the type of players the Chargers have been going for. It'd be very on brand, even though it's not the biggest need. And I think, Michael Davis, be damned, if that dude's there, you got to go after him. And maybe Michael Davis is there as like a stopgap for, a year, or maybe Andrew Booth Jr. takes a little bit, but that talent is definitely there. And the guy who I'm talking about, I think, is maybe one of the more underrated guys in this draft class, honestly. And it seems like he's getting a little bit more buzz now, but I can't stop thinking about Chris Olave, man. I just think that's a guy that is going to probably be there. Garrett Wilson's probably gone. I think Jameson Williams has taken himself maybe out of this conversation of realistic at 17 now, just with the latest rumors out there. And I understand it because the dude is a stud and brings a lot to the table. But Chris Olave has a good chance of being there at 17. And I just see these mocks where, the Packers are getting him and late in the first round, or the Chiefs are getting him. I'm just like, how could this dude fall? I just don't really understand the downside to him, especially after running a sub 4.40. The dude does everything else well. I mean, there's just not much you can really take away. And I think for Justin Herbert specifically, having a dude that just gets as wide open as that dude does, whether or not him and Keenan Allen are redundant, I think isn't even the conversation, because he has the speed and the separation in the deep part of the field that, always makes him a threat there. He might not have the speed of one of those other guys, but he separates so well once he's down there. He hits another gear once he passes that safety. And I just think he's just such a good prospect to me, David, that it's just too fun for me to pass up here.
Well, yeah, and let's remember Keenan Allen ran a 4.7. Okay, so I mean these two players are not even anywhere
just
close
route running
in
wise.
that in that aspect.
Releases.
Yeah, I'm just talking about speed.
Different kind of athlete.
Release and their route running ability. Yes, very similar. I mean, this guy very explosive with his releases, and he uses that a lot to win on his routes. He has a knack for finding the soft spots in the zones and really presenting a good target to his quarterback. That's one of the things that showed up time and time again. And he has the quickness and agility to get those yards after catch that you're looking for. Yeah. I mean, this could be that missing link to the offense as well. And I said that before. I would not hate that pick at all. Chris Olave could be that last weapon to a already incredibly talented and very dangerous Chargers receiving core.
And I just think, you do need other things, right? You do need a right tackle. There's still other ways you could go to fill a bigger need. But I think if you're going best player available and that dude's on the board, there's a good chance he could be that. Because out of the receivers I've watched, I mean, it's just hard for me to imagine this dude not being good. I mean, yes, there's some things he doesn't do well, and he's probably never going to be the contested catch guy, and it hasn't mattered much because he's constantly wide open. He's not going to be super physical over the field or over the middle of the field or, breaking a lot of tackles if guys can get their hands on him. But he has the speed, he has the acceleration, he has the smoothness. He's just such a clean prospect. And I think he could still be realistic for the Chargers at 17 if they're trying to go best player available. And then you still have Josh Palmer, right? I mean, that gives you more flexibility of one of these big contracts, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. We'll see how this go. But then you have two young guys on really cheap contracts that you can really take this offense potentially to the next level. Because Brandon Staley wants guys that can get deep, but also threaten you with everything else too. That's exactly what Chris Olave is to me. I think he fits that mold to a T. But maybe they'll just throw a random dart at the board, David. We just don't know with the Chargers. I mean, they have, I feel been somewhat predictable lately, in the first round. Yeah, I mean, you knew they were probably going to get a tackle. You knew they wanted a quarterback, right, with Justin Herbert. But they also traded back up for Kenneth Murray, and we didn't see that coming. So coming up after this, we are going to be talking about some dark horse candidates, maybe some guys we haven't talked about so far for the Chargers at 17, who they could maybe surprise us with, but maybe it's not a bad thing. Maybe there's just guys we haven't talked about that can make more sense for the Chargers at 17. But all right, David, well, we have one more here on a mock draft Monday we have to get into, and that's our dark horse pick, something we haven't done during this draft season so far. But there could be a chance that nobody really knows, right? And I think especially the further you get down in the draft, the less clear it becomes because, when you're picking at 6, you're probably going to have a shot at one of those top 3 quarterbacks for the most part, right? At 13, you didn't know you'd get Rashawn Slater, but maybe you thought a Christian Darrisaw would be there or someone like that. You felt like you might have a good option to go for. But at 17, it gets a little dicey. I do think in this draft class, there's enough good players there that I'm like, okay, at 17, the Chargers should come away with a player that can impact the game for them this season. But I wanted to talk about dark horse candidates for the Chargers at 17 today, David. So who did you go with your dark horse candidate?
Yeah, so I mean, a need that I think we haven't really talked about a whole lot lately is a position group on the Chargers that, especially after the way free agency has gone, is a lot lighter in the talent department than it was when it started. And so that's why my dark horse candidate is Nakobe Dean, linebacker from Georgia. I think linebacker is an underrated need. They need to inject some youth into that position and some talent. And Nakobe Dean has a lot of talent. I mean, 70-plus tackles in 2 straight seasons, 10.5 tackles for loss, and 6 sacks. He's a true 3-down linebacker, and he shows good natural coverage skills, and he did it a lot at Georgia. It's all over his tape. He stays calm in the chaos, and he has a very rare ability to shed blocks despite his size. He can run sideline to sideline, and he is very effective as a pass rusher as well as a linebacker. So I like this pick for the Chargers as a dark horse candidate because of all the different things that he does at a high level.
You surprised me with that one. I definitely wasn't expecting you to go into Kobe Dean there. He's somebody we talked about, I feel like, earlier in the process before free agency and stuff. And like, the dude's a freak. Like,
Yeah.
the dude is just such a good player. He had such an impact for a Georgia defense that has so many NFL players on it. I mean, when you're
Yeah.
able to kind of stand out the way that dude did for a guy who's honestly a little bit undersized, has short arms, but still can find your way through traffic as good as him. I mean, you want to talk about blitzers with Andrew Booth Jr. This dude's the best blitzer in the country, hands down. I mean, the dude is a freak and is a Tasmanian devil when he goes through the middle. And I just think that the real big issue here is the rubber meeting the road with the front office and the coaching staff. Because
Yeah.
the thing is when you look, because you're like, you're telling me you don't value linebackers, right? That's
Yeah.
what you're saying, especially for the price that he left with. And you think you can get it done with the guys that you have now and potentially addressing it in the draft because you didn't address it in free agency, obviously.
Yeah.
But if you don't care about linebackers, are you going to spend your 17th pick on a linebacker, right? I think that's where the question comes, and that's what makes it a dark horse, right?
Yeah.
I think that's why it definitely came out of left field, but such a good player, right? And I think
Yeah.
he would make if you're trying to totally overhaul the Chargers defense, that would be a big piece in that direction. I think that dude's going to be good because it's just those instincts, the athleticism, the way he just fuels the game. Like, I
Yeah.
mean, he's just such an impressive player. So for mine, I mean, I think that's kind of, these are situational things. I went with Zion Johnson, the guard from Boston College, just because we
Okay.
haven't really talked about at 17 a guard being an option. And I mean, maybe, yeah, I'd like to trade back and get a guy like this at 20. But there's also a chance this dude's gone because, like, I think he is the best interior, or at least the best guard. Maybe Linderbaum's a little bit better at center. But if you're talking about guard, a guy that plays a position that the Chargers need, and you're getting the top player at his position in the draft, that's what Zion Johnson brings to the table. And I love this dude. Like, I feel like John Gruden right there saying, I love this dude. But this dude fits, he'd be this is a guy who's going to go in at left guard, and
Mhm.
Matt Filer is going to kick out to right tackle in this
Yes.
situation. And what you're getting with this guy is a guy who's going to put people in the dirt, has the nasty mentality, will keep up that great left side of the offensive line rushing together, and a dude who's great in pass protection. I mean, I really don't have a lot of flaws to his game. And you'd be taking a premier player, not a premier position, right? You'd just be like, all right, I know this guy is going to help me right away on the offensive line. I'm going to plug him in and play him. And he moves people out of the way in the running game, and he puts people in the dirt, and he knows how to pass protect well. I think this dude's a full package at guard. If they ended up taking him there, maybe it's not the best value at 17 for a guard. I'd still be hard not, it'd be hard for me not to be happy about it.
Well, it might not be the value that you expect to get right away, but it might be the value that you see over time. I think that's definitely something that would be apparent with Zion Johnson.
I mean, look how much the good guards are making now, man.
Exactly.
I mean, some of those good guards are making 15+ million a year.
Yeah, I mean, look at Brendan Sheriff. My goodness,
Yeah.
man. That guy got paid, especially after some injury concerns throughout his career. But I love that pick too, especially if their intention is to have Matt Fowler play right tackle, which to me, it seems like that's the case because the Chargers have not made any moves on the offensive line. So that tells me they probably have more confidence in Brendan Hymus, and they probably expect Matt Fowler to go out to right tackle. And if that's the case, bringing in a Zion Johnson to pair up with Rashawn Slater and Corey Linsley is an amazing idea. I mean, if you're going to do it, go grab the best player at that position, plug him in, and let him play against two all-pro players on the left side. I mean, that would be a great idea. And you get a right tackle in Matt Fowler that's played right tackle in this league at a high level, and that could solve at least 4 out of the 5 positions on your offensive line.
Yeah, and you'd still have Brandon Hymus, right? A guy that you was supposed to kind of take over at guard eventually anyways. And I just think that the other part of it is just historically speaking, maybe not with the Chargers, and they've never drafted, an interior offensive lineman that highly. Under Tom Telesco, the highest one is Forrest Lamb. But it is still a very important position, and he's a guy that, like, with tackles, you don't know how they're going to translate, right? It's a much riskier position, I think, to take, a guy like Trevor Penning, maybe the 4th best tackle in the draft class, than getting the best guard and a guy, he's not Quentin Nelson, but he is in kind of that same mold where, like, there's just not a lot of holes in his game. He did play left tackle even, right? And I think that helped him
Position
with his pass sets. Oh, I mean, I don't know about position flex. He's like under 6'3", but when you're talking about a guy that just took what he learned at tackle and used it as guard as a, as far as picking up stunts and things like that. Super
Yeah.
high IQ, good anchor, 9.5 RAS, super athletic dude, and fits in well with what the Chargers want to do. I mean, he's already a great pass protector. He has heavy hands, picks these things up. It's just, he's a really good prospect. And I think that's kind of the theme I went with today, right? He's just like such a solid prospect there. And you're continuing to put guys around Justin Herbert that are going to help him.
Yeah, I mean, you can't hate the logic. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. I've always been a proponent of investing heavily of the spine of your team.
Yeah.
And of course, that's your offensive and defensive line. And at least it seems like with the emergence of Brandon Staley as the Chargers head coach, that has been much more at the forefront of the philosophy of building this football team, which I cannot be any
100%.
more overjoyed about.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's just, you can never have enough dudes that are like him, right? Like, there's clips of him, you can look up on Twitter, of him just like literally like sticking a forearm out and like knocking a linebacker into the ground, just
I
like
love it.
he's a child, right? And that's kind of what this dude does. Like, he takes it personally, he connects at the second level on his combo box, and he's just a really fun player to watch. If you guys want to get hyped about offensive linemen, go watch this dude, because he would help the Chargers offense in a big way, and I think continue to shift not even the culture of the Chargers, the culture of that offensive line, which took a huge step last year. He would be another huge step, and you could put him where he's already comfortable at left guard. You would upgrade your right tackle and your guard situation at the same time. Two birds with one stone. But that is going to wrap things up for today's show. But make sure you guys are subscribed to the Locked On Chargers YouTube channel, because we have Daniel Popper coming up this week, and maybe another big interview, some big draft interviews coming up around the corner as well. So subscribe on YouTube. Also follow the show for free on all platforms. Wherever you get your podcast from, you can find the Locked On Chargers podcast there. We also post a show every day to all of our social media. You can hit us up on Twitter at LockedOnLAC. You can find me on Twitter at Dan Talk Sports, and David Droegemeier on Twitter at DroTalkSD. If you guys want to get your mock drafts in, or your reactions, or your questions, we will definitely be doing Fan Mail Friday and doing more draft stuff on Fan Mail Friday. So if you guys want to hit that up, you guys can call into 323-524-7924 to the Locked On Chargers voicemail line. And we'll definitely be getting into some draft questions and getting some voicemails on the show to go along with some really big guests that I'm really excited to get to. So make sure you guys are back here for that. But until then, take it easy and go Bolts.